This is the Note Closer Show, where you get the latest developments in distressed note investing and learn the secrets of how you can control millions of dollars worth of property for pennies on the dollar. Get educated and entertained by someone who has closed thousands of deals and lives to support you in achieving the same. Now, here's your host, CEO of We Close Notes, Scott Carson.
So we are going to record this, guys, but we are live streaming this to Facebook as well. Jason's, I think like a lot of people out there kind of feeling like, okay, where do I get started? How do I help people out as best I can? And Jason does an amazing job. And like I said, one of my longest friends, known him for, golly, going on close to 30 years now. And he's just
probably more than 30 years.
Yeah, actually. Probably more. Yeah, no, you're right about that. I think, yeah, you're probably 33, 34 years. Yeah. Two small town boys from Ingleside, Texas. And Jason, why don't you share a little bit about who you are and kind of what you do, and then we'll dive into kind of what you put together here for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, I stepped out to get someone to help me check on the internet connection, but no one's here, so I don't know what I was thinking. So we'll just go with it. And for some reason, if it's a problem, I'll call it on my phone or something like that.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, like you said, my name's Jason Byrd, and ran the Byrd Law Firm for a number of years now, 15, 16 years. My primary practice area is in really commercial litigation. And so I do some light business, I'd call light business work, but and I'm capable of doing it. It's real boring to me, so I don't typically do that work day in and day out. But in some background on why I think this is relevant is I've also spent several sessions lobbying and testifying on proposed bills and legislation going through in a variety of different areas. So as unexciting as it sounds, I've got a little experience of going through bills, proposed bills, new legislation. So the genesis of what we're talking about is all of this broke out, it's been unfolding over the past months and weeks. And, to some degree, it's basically my business has come to a halt. I think at some point it'll pick back up, but because of the litigation, I'm reliant on court dates and trial settings and in-person depositions and just things that move the ball forward. And that all came to a screeching halt. So, I was been trying to figure out, how to restart all that. And additionally, I'm trying to figure out just how to be helpful. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about viruses, and on the physical and the health stuff, I'm pretty helpless there. And then a good friend of mine who's a lobbyist there in Austin, Jacob Smith, and we've been talking, and we said, let's just go through these bills. Let's go through them like we would over the past 15 years, going through legislation and try and break them down and summarize them. And then, and he did a pretty good job of that. I helped him on some of that, but for the most part, he did that in the one document. And then what I did was kind of just a memo trying to break down some of what I thought were important provisions to the small business type of folks that I normally come in contact to. I mean, there's thousands of pages of legislation. Frankly, the people who passed it don't know everything that's in it, And so we've got a decent summary, but there's no experts out there in it. And so what I did was just really try to break down a general strategy that I think, a lot of small businesses could employ. Kind of kick it down the middle of the, every situation's a little different. That's a lawyer in me and saying that, you might lean one way a little more or lean one way a little more, depending on what you have going on. But just tried to make some simple advice for mom and pop up to, fairly significant size concerns. And just said, hey, if you want it, I'll send it to you. I'm not trying to make any money off of it or anything like that. Just, hey, if you want the advice, here you go. Or just the general knowledge, I guess. And so it loosely ties into my practice. Typically I spend most of my time fighting over money for these small businesses or individuals, typically with a bigger concern, suing an insurance company, a bank, or a larger partner or something like that, or oil company. But it all ties in, and I thought, hey, let's talk about it. All your folks are small business type people,
Yeah, I think and you've done a really good job because you shared 2 documents and I shipped those out. One was the 53-page breakdown of it, and yours, your 6-page, I don't want to say Cliff Notes version, but kind of that streamline what you thought was the most important to small business owners. So I thought maybe we start with the 6-page and then we'll go from there. How's that sound? And
that's good. However you want to do, man.
Okay,
whatever
cool.
you want to do.
So why don't I do this? I'm going to pull up. Let me share this. I'm going to see if I still got this pulled up. I should. Here we go. That's the full 53-page. Let me go over here. All right. So yeah, here's the 6-page that you put together. I thought it was well written, Jason. It answered a lot of questions, and I sat in on a few different SBA phone calls and webinars the last couple of days too, figuring out. But why don't we just start first with here, and I'll let you lead, and I'll just scroll through this. How's that sound? And what I'll do too is I'm going to quiet my video so it helps with the internet as well too for everybody. So,
and what I'll add to Scott.
Yeah.
Is kind of what we did in preparation for this is go through the bills, and then go through some of, really spend some detailed time looking at some of these provisions. And also I spent about an hour on a conference call with the lady basically over Texas for the SBA last week. And just kind of talking about, and this was before the passage of the most recent bill. The CARES Act, as they're calling it, but I'll also want to put this in the right context and the frame for your audience on what we're looking at. The legislation itself, yes, that's the law. That's what the law says is going to happen. But we all know that's what says generally what's going to happen, and we've analyzed that. The practicality of how it all plays out. How do I physically go do this? There's a lot of unknowns there, because typically in a normal setting in our country, your Congress or even your state legislature will pass legislation, and then it's up to the various departments in the executive branch to have the rulemaking authority to say, okay, here's the forms, here's how it's going to look, here's what you can do, and there's some variance in there. Well, this was all passed real fast and basically overnight. None of those regulations exist. So Treasury, the SBA, and other departments are trying to come up with that right now. So this is what the law says ultimately should happen, is supposed to happen, but the process getting there, don't take just because that's what Congress passed, it's automatically just going to start happening today.
Yeah. That's the truth, especially with some of these things. The local banks don't even have the paperwork or things set up yet to start taking on applications on things like that. So, but you kind of identify.
I've talked to one client that's actually been able to speak with a local bank to get an application. So everybody else, they're just on the list. Yeah. So I'll start with the first one, and this is a provision that's contained within the CARES Act that was passed last Friday. I believe it was signed by the president last Friday. And they're calling them PPP loans. Now, for the business owners out there, you may be familiar with the SBA and the type of loans they offer. Typically in those type of loans, they're set what they call their 7A program. It's kind of their flagship program. If you want an SBA loan, and other times you go to your bank that's an approved lender, an SBA lender. You talk with them, you fill out the application. It's a little more cumbersome than just a traditional loan typically in the information. They're pretty stringent depending on the size of the loan and trying to get collateral and a number of other things. This triple P program, these PPP loans, are akin to that traditional type loan. Okay, they're going to be operated under that system. So when you start to consider one of these loans, you're going to go through your bank and go through that process. And like you mentioned, your bank may not even have a way for you to apply quite yet. So why are these important? And I've listed them, and I kind of broke them out in levels of importance in a way. These are important, and the simple things to know about these is this is the loan that will wash away, so to speak. This is the loan that can be forgiven to a certain point. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can get a loan for up to 250% of the qualified expenses. And in here we have bullet points. Everybody, on the call can read. It's a limited amount of things. It's basically to protect your payroll, your health insurance premiums, your rent or your mortgage interest. And there may be a few small things that apply, but that's the main things. And so you can get up to 250% times 1 month average of those things. Now, that's not the amount that will be ultimately forgiven under the legislation. Effectively, they're giving you those qualified expenses up to 2 months to 8 weeks. So you can get this loan if you're a big small business, and since they've relaxed some of the affiliation rules that you can have small businesses that if you have a $2 million a month in salaries, I mean, you could max this thing out pretty quick, Mm-hmm. That's not my business, and probably not most of the people's business on the call, but those folks probably, if you've got that size of a concern, you've got lawyers and accountants that you're already paying on staff that are going through it too. So I'm not as worried about those guys. I'm worried about really the guys. Some of us have good businesses, but shutting down for months at a time are scary. So, but what does this give you? The biggest limitation I'd say probably for you and for your folks on this is just you're going to have to keep it within these reimbursable amounts. And on the compensation for your employees and your owners. So guys like me or you or your other owners of the business, there's folks who make over $100,000 a year. They're not gonna forgive you for 2 months of their pay. So I've got the calculation written somewhere in my office. So basically 8 weeks at the max pay is like $15,000, I think $134, something like that. So let's say, and I'm just using this as an example, let's say you pay yourself $200,000 a year out of your company, divide 2 months. Well, you're not going to be able to get that full amount towards it qualifying. You're only going to get somewhere around $7,500. So just note that. But it talks about it right here, and you're right on in the paper what's eligible for the payroll cost, and it's right there. It's all for the most part salary related and or rent related for your place. So, but that's, and the reason I have this first, and I found it was important. It's because of the forgiveness. I mean, that's unprecedented on an SBA loan. I mean, it's really not a loan, it's a grant. So folks need to really take a hard look at this. Now, for most of my clients, it might differ. I could see situations potentially where it could differ. I would probably recommend going to the max of that 8 weeks and then taking a look at some of the other opportunities before I really max this one out. And I know I'm kind of skipping around in terms of the paper, right? And I say that because effectively you do the formula on your basic circumstances and get the 8 weeks, that's forgiven. It's really a grant. In the terms of the remaining amounts, if you took them or you do take them, are favorable indeed. Yep. They're capped at 4%. There's a 6-month deferral, and on any payments, there's no penalty for prepayment, and they're amortized over 10 years. Mm-hmm. However, those terms are not, in my opinion, near as favorable as the terms on an economic disaster loan. So, I would tell most folks with a small business to take a real hard look at that. The economic disaster loans were actually funded, and not in the CARES Act, but funded in the Families First Corona Act, and its supplement that were passed about a week to 10 days prior to the CARES Act being passed at the end of last week. So, and those provide a pretty substantial amount, not obviously not $2 trillion. But you should know $2 trillion is not going to small business. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? It's a big portion that's going to big business and into other areas. But under the disaster loans, there's a little bit of difference. And these aren't flagship 7A loans, they're 7B loans, which that means you're applying straight with the government. They're coming straight out of the Treasury. So if you get a loan, they're paying you out of the Treasury. Interesting, in my conference call with the SBA Texas representative, they can't go out on a limb, but if you kind of read in the tea leaves, in the past, when they do these type of loans, there are a number of considerations they make that I really get the sense that they're relaxing. She stressed to us that they're looking at two things. They're looking at credit history and ability to repay. And frankly, they're looking at ability to repay more strong than anything. Sometimes as a small business, you might have great credit, medium credit, or poor credit, or somewhere in between. But if you really go look at everything, you pay all your bills. It's just the nature of sometimes we get out there and we don't. So that to me is pretty positive news. Additionally, there's not a collateral requirement. So typically they would require anything over about $25,000, they would require some collateral. Now, that being said, if you have collateral to give, they're going to ask you to pledge it. Now, those loans are up to a max of $2 million. They're automatically amortized to 30 years, and they're capped at 3.75%. And there's a 12-month deferral on any payment and no penalty for prepayment. And so that's why I've just said, folks, take a look at really what your situation is, right? Because those are, frankly, better terms. And I expect, too, that there's going to be a bit of a mad dash, a mad rush for the forgiven loans under the PPP program, that just procedurally getting through the extra layer of the bank and everything else is going to be difficult. And I kind of skipped over one thing there, and that's the EIDL grant. It's an economic, it's under the disaster loan, but it's really a grant. This is a pretty easy process, guys. You get online, and right now, this is where the last time I checked, this was the only thing you could apply for. You couldn't apply for the loan yet. They're just not set up for it. In fact, last week, the SBA's disaster loan website kept crashing. They just didn't have the capacity yet. They weren't quite prepared, and I get that, but they were working on it. And but right now you can get online, and there's some pretty basic information. Your tax ID number, your principal, who owns the business, things like that. Your revenue from last year, cost of goods sold, and your banking information. And they'll make a determination. And most folks who have a small business are going to probably be entitled to this $10,000 grant. Now, the legislation says they're going to wire it to you within 3 days. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see.
So everybody kind of I've worked with or talked to, including me, only completed that. I think the earliest we had was Monday or Tuesday. I think Tuesday morning. So no one's received the wire yet, and we'll see. But that's a grant. That's forgiven. Now, if you end up taking an economic disaster loan under the Family First Coronavirus Act program, that $10,000 will count towards your cap. But okay,
right?
And so, and effectively too, it's a little different. It's kind of confusing when you say it's an economic disaster loan. I live here on the Gulf Coast, and so we're familiar with that from hurricanes. And that's typically what they're used for. It typically requires some type of damage to your business property, where you're shut down, you can't work because you had some type of natural disaster. They're running it through this program, but they've designated basically everywhere in the country has had economic disaster, and there's no physical damage required. Pretty obvious, but they've made that clear. And I just get the sense, in addition to reading the legislation, but from talking with them, they're really going to try and make these things work for people, because the SBA realizes that, a lot of us are going to be in a bind if we don't at least get some help, So that's the short of it. Some practical tips when you do get to these points, particularly if you apply for this second version here. I've got these economic injury disaster loans. Do it online. If you for some reason, I doubt anybody on the call isn't able to, if they can get on this call, they can probably get on the SBA website.
Right.
And it's listed there. But if you have friends or family that just aren't comfortable with it, help them. They will take a paper copy, but I'm telling you right now, just get to the back of the line if they get you. Secondly, really make sure you have all of your information that they require. There's about 5 forms that they'll require with these. You submit it all at once. Don't, I got most of it, I'm going to send it and I'll get this other last one when I don't. Under normal circumstances, that would probably be okay. But even the SBA reps are telling you you're just going to end up in the shuffle. And, your best bet is to have everything right the first time. Really, really take care with it, just because of the volume. They're hiring people right now on some of the legal forums I'm on. The SBA's, hey, we need lawyers. We need counselors and advisors. They just need people because they're about to get overrun. Now, luckily, this legislation under the first bill provided some additional funding for them. So, I think they'll be able to play it out. And like I said, too, these bills did so much other stuff. I mean, there's funding going to states under the first bill to help put some money into the unemployment benefits. There's money going towards the Department of Defense to test people. I mean, I think they put $83 million in the Department of Defense for just testing people. So there's a number of items through if you really want to geek up on it, read through it, but these are really the things that I thought were most important to just day-to-day small businesses.
Mm-hmm. We got some questions. You want to jump in and let's answer some questions real fast if we can, for the best that we can. Somebody asked, what's the difference between a sole proprietor and being self-employed under the PPP?
They say it's not going to matter.
Okay. There we go. Let's see here. Another one asked, how does this apply to a single member LLC that takes 1 or 2 distributions over the course of 12 months? Do you average the 2 distributions over 12 months, or how would you figure that out?
Right. I would average it that way. However, like I said at the start of the call, there's no regs, there's no interpretations, there's no Treasury or IRS regs. So that would be the reasonable approach. But there's no answer on that. And that's the thing. If anybody tells you they're an expert on all this, well, they're not, and because there's been no regulations on any of this. Mm-hmm.
Douglas, we are not.
So just before I leave that though, so take the most reasonable approach you can. I typically only make 2 distributions. Let me average that out over 12 and take 1/12 of that to come up with my average monthly. If they're consistent. Now, if you're inconsistent and up and down, I mean, it's just hard for me to tell you without seeing the specific numbers. If it's consistently in an amount that's over the course of a year, $100,000 or more, well, it's real easy. You're going to take the max.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see here. If your small business is a C corporation, still eligible for an emergency EIDL, yeah, you're still available because it covers you look at your payroll, look what you're paying out. If you're, salaries up to $100,000, figure out what that is, add those in as costs, Roger, and then 2.5 times what a monthly amount would be, and that's what you'd apply for. on that.
Right.
So,
and they've been, and I know where a lot of these questions are coming from, because there's a lot of technicalities typically with SBA applications and different entities and how you're operating. Just know in the back of your mind, if you're not a lawyer, just generally those have been heavily relaxed. So we're talking about, sole proprietorships, all the way up through C Corps, S Corps. I'm an S Corp, single member LLCs, managed LLCs, multi-members. Just about any type of entity out there operating is probably going to be fine. And even some nonprofits are eligible.
Yeah. All right, guys, if you're asking questions about the website, the SBA website, we don't handle any of that. We can't answer uploading questions or the fact that it's not allowing you to upload. We don't have any contact with that. We're simply going through some of these bills and giving you a bit of a guide. I don't know when you would submit it. If there's obviously an upload box link, then you probably want to upload the documents to that upload link. We aren't involved with the SBA website of any sort. So for those questions, you're going to need to go directly to there and go from there. But a question here, Celeste asked a question: emergency grant up to $10,000. What is the formula for estimating how much a business might receive? And that
I don't know their exact formula. There's no regs on it. They're going to look at your numbers. They ask very little information. I suspect if you're legitimately operating business, you're going to get the 10 grand. Now, if you're doing 10 grand of business a year, you're probably not on this call. So, and I hate to be, I'm not trying to be rude, but if you're operating a real business, you're going to get to 10 grand. I've actually gone through the process earlier in the week. That's one of right now I couldn't even access an application to make for the full loan, but what I could access was the grant, the $10,000 grant. And the information is pretty basic. It's name, rank, serial number. The only economic information they ask are what were your gross revenues over the last 12 months and what were the cost of goods sold and reaching those revenues. And they ask for your wiring instructions. And it literally takes 5 minutes to do.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You advise people, hey, everybody get on there, apply for the EIDL.
Yeah.
That's get up to 10,000. And if you apply for the payroll protection one, the PPP, if you get approved for the PPP, they're going to deduct the 10,000 whatever they give you on the emergency from that amount. So you can apply for.
No, I don't believe so. They're going to think that they will deduct that for if you apply for a loan under the EIDL.
Oh, okay.
So effectively, try and figure out the need as best you can. I mean, who knows what that means right now? I think every day we get new information.
Right.
So to the extent you can do that, but there's a way where if you want to maximize the 8-week period where they'll fully forgive and get the 10 grand, it could all literally be money that's quote a loan, but it's all either partial, it's either partially a loan and a grant, or it's all forgiven. So, I mean, you could get effectively 8 weeks and the 10 grand and not ask for any more, but not owe anything back. I'll caution people against that for one reason. The SBA reps are cautioning against that because of uncertainty. You may in 3 months determine, well, man, maybe I really needed to ask for a little bit of loan, $200,000. I'll just use a number. Getting back in front of it in the system could be problematic. They are telling us, ask for your maximum you think you'll need. That doesn't mean you have to take it. You could get approved for a $2 million loan and take $100,000 because that's what's going to be either a grant or paid back or forgiven. But I would ask for it on the front end as opposed to the back end, and at least have that flexibility, because flexibility helps, in situations where there's a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. That's the truth there. Let's see here. Nicola says SBA forgivable grants up to $10 million. How does that work? And the SBA disaster loans, $2 million. Can you explain?
Okay. Is there a place where I can see these questions? Where
you might see? Yeah, you should be able to see on the control panel there with the Q&A. And then Carrie asked a question: our business is the 52 range on the NAICS code. we have more than 500 employees, but based on the SBA set, we qualify off of our gross receipts of income, which should be under 41.5 million. Do you know if the SBA will look at several years of tax returns or the last tax return that was filed with the IRS to determine our gross receipts?
No idea, because there's no regs on it. So, I mean, they're writing that right now. They're determining that policy. I suspect they'll look at your last return or your last 12 months, your last full year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
based on talking to them and just taking the spirit of the legislation. I mean, it's really a point at which they've tried to make it as open and available, from my perspective, than I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. So, but if you're right on that cusp, who knows? We'll see what they write.
And then a couple of big things I think I've seen questions asked on other things like that. This stuff is for your employees that are inside the United States for the most part, the people that are paying taxes. If you've got contractors on payroll outside in Mexico or something like that, that doesn't encompass them. If we've got if we got VAs in the Philippines, doesn't cover them. This is going to cover your domestic job employees. Now, if you've got somebody that's living abroad but still doing work here who's a United States citizen, it would cover their payroll, but not somebody who's foreign to the United States on that. That was a couple of big things there too. And I believe that to get the grant forgiven, you've got to continue to pay out and have payroll and keep people paid for the foreseeable future.
Right. You have to pay them for those time periods which you took it for. So example, let's say I have $100,000 a month payroll, for use of an easy, number, and I take out the max 250. Okay, I take 250,000. I get the money. I lay everybody off. Well, you're going to owe money back that you're not using to pay for folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then I've seen some, seen some people talk about it, like Wells Fargo. There's some banks that don't even have the paperwork yet. If you've got an SBA approved lender,
right.
You don't necessarily have to. If you don't bank with an SBA approved lender, it might be good to. If not, you can jump on the website and go there, or go in, and maybe if your bank does have somebody that helps out with that, can walk you through it. Maybe you get a little bit better service with it's somebody's there. But I know that a lot of the banks are still trying to figure out exactly how they're going to collect that documentation and submit it, because it's different. Some are going to make some may be easier, some may be a little bit more difficult. The reason that are at least doing it and make it go through the banks, though, is that at least there's some systems to submit those. Maybe to offset the SBA website being bombarded nonstop with that stuff. So I think, if you've got employees and you got payroll, hey, this would be something to get on there. And, especially next week is probably going to be a better time to do that. But I would, like what Jason said, I would jump on definitely and apply for the EIDL one. And then,
right. At least apply for the 10 grand now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll add to that. We're told that they're going to have, by this Friday, I guess that's tomorrow. I'm starting to forget the days.
They are blending together, aren't they?
Yeah, but tomorrow they're supposed to have the SBA paperwork out and some more solidity on the regs. But like I said, this is all happening real fast. So oftentimes I think those things are said are aspirational. So, just stay on top of it, keep checking it. Some banks, for Family Services is here in Southeast Texas, is a nonprofit. We run the Battered Women's Shelter, and I'm in a counseling center. In our bank, they're already working with us. We've got the application. We're working on it. That's the only folks I've talked to that have actually even been able to get an application. So none of my business folks. I know one of the big banks here has said, look, we're just putting people on a list. So, I don't know. There's a question here, I think, from Andre. I may have said that wrong, that what's considered cost of goods sold. Well, that's not defined. There's no regs on that. But generally what, I just would look at, well, what's your overhead and versus your revenue. If you're service-based, well, it's hard, for example, it's hard for me to say, well, what's the cost of my goods sold? Well, I provide a service. So I look at my underlying overhead is what I've done.
Yeah, that would be like with your rent and mortgage costs and your payroll. And you're not including not the net. You want to obviously include the gross with all the payroll taxes in there too if you're applying for the PPP as part of the.
But I was talking. That's specifically was talking in reference to the $10,000 grant.
Okay.
What's it take to run, and what were my revenues? I mean, and it's there's not a whole lot of questioning there. It's just saying, hey, generally, what are you doing? But there's, like I said, there's no guidance I can point to you with the SBA or with Treasury or anybody. So it's just take a reasonable approach is all I can tell folks as far as the details until more comes out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is, I think you and I both agree, this is just the first wave. I think we're going to see a couple other bills that get passed here in the near future too, huh, Jason?
Yeah, I would think so. But I don't know. I for example, I mean, you see, I'll tell you, a lot of school districts say, 1st of May is when we're planning on going back to school. And my wife actually, Jennifer just started teaching this semester. So go figure. She had worked for 17 years and she decides to go start teaching. And now she's having to Zoom all these kids and all this stuff. But I told her nicely, I said, if you think you're going back to school this year, you're crazy,
Yeah.
And so a lot of it's dictated to the extent there's restrictions on us. Well, I know it's aspirational that, hey, this is all over by April 30th. Now, what happens if 80,000 people between now and the end of the month pass away from coronavirus? You think we're opening wide back open? I don't think so. And also, I don't know what kind of business folks you've got on the call, but I'll use me as an example. So I've got a litigation practice, and when we full back open, it's not like, okay, day one, we're back at 100%,
Yeah.
Everybody is in the same boat. Nobody else handling the litigation has had access to the courts. And it's going to be slow going. So for every month, we're shut down. In my business, I feel like we kind of got a 4 to 6 month lag getting back up. So, I think the folks at SBA are going to understand that. They're going to have to.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see that. We see that on our real estate stuff side, especially on the investment side, when you've got tenants that are applying for delayed rent, or we've got borrowers that are reaching out and asking for forbearance agreements or delayed on their mortgage payments. You just have to expect that. And I think the next round of bills is going to deal directly with that, with the real estate side of things. This is to deal with your employees and the immediate thing of trying to keep people with some sort of work or some sort of salary to help solve some things. I know I've got friends here that run businesses that are like, they're coming out of pocket to pay payroll till the end of the month or a week or two, and they don't know what they're going to be able to do after that. So this is a good thing. It kind of feels like that little Dutch boy putting his finger in the dam, right? Trying to stop so many different places bleeding.
Yeah, it is. But I think for those of us willing to hustle and to be patient and to streamline, I mean, you'll be able to survive, and then some of us won't, though.
Yeah.
If you're not in a position where you can demonstrate you can repay the actual amount of money you need, then your business is probably not going to make it. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's just how it goes. That being said, though, even if that happens, that's not the end of the world. We're resilient folks, and the solace I've gotten from it. I was talking to a client this morning, and I said, the good news for me is, hey, at least we're all in it too. I'm not the only one who's nervous about it. I'm not the only one who can't fully operate my business. I mean, it's all of us. And so, we're the rising tide floats all boats, and it brings them all back down too. And we're just gonna have to ride it out.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody asked the question, I run a third-party warehouse. We store products and ship them out. How does the cost of goods sold calculate for that? That's where you're pretty much just going to take your salaries and your business costs, and that's what you're going to figure in. Yeah, you don't have any stuff, but that's the thing you're going to look at. What are your costs? And figure that when you submit in your documents. All right.
Yeah, well, and in that's the question that's being asked with on the $10,000 grant.
Yeah.
They literally ask you to fill in a blank and put a number. What was your estimated revenue? What was the cost of the goods sold? So, your general overhead to generate that revenue is the number I would put at this point. without any regulations. And I knew, and that was the one danger. I knew we'd do this. Everybody would have a lot of specific, well, how are they treating this? How are they treating that? And they don't know how they're treating this or treating that. And so that's really why I just have to say, well, try and take the most reasonable approach, how, you would think it would be treated.
Yeah, exactly. Just try to take a little common sense and figure that out there. We don't have all the answers here for you. It's just meant to be a guide. And like I said, if you've registered for this, I sent an email out with the 2 forms that Jason provided. We went through the 6-page, the 53-page. I don't think we want to go through that unless you've got some stuff that you want to identify that, Jason. Let everybody else read that themselves.
Not really. I mean, it's really just some bullet point summaries of each section of each one of the bills. 90% of it will not be applicable to the folks who are interested in this information. And then, frankly, it doesn't have near as much information with respect to what my other paper does, because I wanted to highlight those because, after doing this for 20 years, what's going to be, for the most part, important to your folks and what's not. And just try to give some general advice as to, here are the bare bones, what you got to know. And for the information in here, I mean, this will walk you through it. You're not going to get hurt if you just kind of follow kind of what I've got down here, what you can get, what you can't get. Now, actually going through the physical steps of doing it, once again, who knows, I just stay on your bank, and get on their list if they don't have the forms, if you're interested in that, and then just keep tabs. I even list the website with regard to the economic injury disaster loan. Just keep on tabs and keep going there, go every morning. And then in the meantime, apply for the $10,000 grant, at least get that coming.
Castle asked the question, can contracted revenue be used, amount of profit expected on a property under contract but not closed on yet and in jeopardy of not closing? I don't think so, Castle, because it'd be really kind of hard to.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. I'll start putting my lawyer hat on, and if I was representing you, I could make a pretty coherent argument that it should be applied. But they're really, what I think they're going to be looking at is not what your anticipated revenue was, but what traditionally has your revenue been. Yeah. And taking the idea that if traditionally your revenue has been in this ballpark range, then if they give you a $1 million loan at 7.75%, and you come back into a traditional what you're doing, are you going to be able to repay it? That's really what they're looking at.
Traditionally, it's been really hard to get an SBA loan if you're a real estate investor or you're doing fix and flips that just don't really apply to it. There's a whole formula for getting lines of credit and being a business owner, stuff like that. You may want to check out our buddy Merrill Chandler, who does that with Get Fundable or Credit Sense and helping get lines of credit. But even how your entity is set up, there's a lot of names that are like blacklist immediately, red flag that they won't lend on. Investments, bank, fund, anything like that can be a red flag they qualify you immediately.
And that's why I thought it was important to talk to you and your folks, because if you've been in your business, you automatically think, well, SBA, what the hell is that going to do for me?
Right.
And it's not your mama's SBA type loan. It's really a unique situation, and likely one of the only times, hopefully, that you'll ever really fall under the gamut of SBA, and it's because of the situation, from sole proprietorship up to C corps, relaxed affiliation rules. I mean, they're really making it wide open, and particularly those disaster loans coming straight out of the Treasury. They never do that. It's always the 7A flagship program. I mean, they're just cutting you the money. They're just literally printing the money to give to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Leela, just drop me an email at scott@weclosenotes.com is my direct email. I'll make sure and send over the 2 forms that we talked about that Jason put together. If you registered before we went live, you would have gotten a link. But if not, just drop me an email at scott@weclosenotes.com, and I'll be glad to forward over the 2 forms for you. All right, Leela. And then you can always, Jason, do you mind if people reach out to you as well?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, my litigation slowed way down, so that was part of why I took all the time to do this, is just trying to be helpful. I mean, I'm just sitting here, and there's 3 teenage kids in my house being homeschooled. I don't want to be there. So I'm just kind of sitting in my office and doing Zoom calls and Zoom hearings and helping folks and really walking friends and family through this stuff. So yeah, I got no problem with it.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to reach out to you? Want to drop you an email and schedule
sure.
from there?
Yeah, sure. It's Jason. I guess that would help if I give it to him. Jason, Jason, at txbyrd.com. So Texas abbreviation and my last name, txbyrd.com. Same website. Or you can give us a call at the office, anytime, 409-924-0660.
He's also the host of the popular podcast, the Byrd Chronicles, as well. And,
well, I haven't been doing many lately, and I'm finally back on. The first of the year, I've just been busy, but I did one this week on family law, and I thought it was important because all the family law lawyers are here. People with schools closed and it overlapped with spring break, and folks fighting over who's got the kids and who does this, and these are when a lot of more folks are cooped up, we see a higher incidence of domestic violence and all kinds of stuff. So I had a family law lawyer really to talk about those issues that I know nothing about other than see them in society, And I think I'm going to do one tomorrow on Friday evening with my best buddy who's not a lawyer, and we're just going to sit here and basically drink and
there you go.
Talk shit. So yeah.
Hey, that's the best there for you.
Yeah.
Patrick says, thank you so much for the handouts of your time. It really helped. Thank you both. No problem, Patrick. Glad we could help out. Let's see here. Leela.
And let me say this again too, Scott, to that point, and you're welcome, guys. Like I said, this is really me just offering it out. I don't want anything for it. If you can use it, great. If not, just throw it away. You're not hurting my feelings.
Yeah, exactly. And if you know somebody it could be helpful to, feel free to forward on to them as well. For the most part.
I've just been trying just the lawyer in me. I didn't want to just post stuff on the internet, even though I have disclaimers in it saying this isn't legal advice. I'd rather it be, if you get the information, you got it from one of our contacts. It just makes me feel a little better. I'm not sure why, but anyhow.
Good stuff. Well, it's all Phil. It's that you've always been that way, wanting to help out people as best as we can. I think it comes from the small town grassroots, and both of our parents being entrepreneurs and small business owners as we grew up. So,
yep.
If you guys need my email, mine's scott@weclosenotes.com. If you've registered, I'll be sending a follow-up email out with a replay for those that registered for this as well. But scott@weclosenotes.com, and Jason's is Jason@TXBYRD, Byrd spelled with a Y, textbird.com, and that's his best thing. And I'll email his contact information out to everybody as well. Actually, if you've got the email that I forwarded, his contact information is in the email that I sent out as well. So
yeah, and I think it's on the Byrd Chronicles website too. You could probably
find
it. I think there's a link. I don't need to tell you how serious I take the podcast. It's just for fun, but
Hey, whatever. That's the beauty of it. Yeah, you got some interesting interviews on there. You had Wendy Davis on there, and then a few other people too recently, or in the past. So
I had a buddy that was a professional MMA fighter, so that was kind of fun. Now he's an insurance salesman. Go figure, right?
He probably is the best client.
Yeah,
that's right. I'll arm wrestle you for you to sign. Exactly. So, all right, guys. Hey, that's going to wrap it up for this. Jason, once again, thank you, bud, so much for coming on and provide stuff. We'll as stuff comes out, we may ask you to come back on if that's cool.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, if I don't know, I'll tell you that, but I'm happy to help in any way I can. Yeah.
All right. Leela, Scott at weclosenotes.com. Simple email address. Just drop me an email. We'll see you guys later. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks, Jason.
Yeah. Thank you, bud. It's fun.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Hey, did